I am Isaiah Coleman. I'm 70 years old, and I just buried my only son. But the dirt wasn't even settled on his casket when my daughter-in-law Brenda gave me 30 days to get out of my house, the house I built with my own hands. She thought I was just a broke, heartbroken old man. She thought she had won. I just smiled, packed a small fishing bag, and left. She never should have underestimated me. Because the next morning she didn't get a realtor. She got the Atlanta police. Before I tell you exactly how I unraveled her web of lies, please let me know in the comments where you are watching from. And please like and subscribe to this channel if you believe that justice must always be served no matter how long it takes. The cold November wind at Westview Cemetery cut right through my thin suit, but it was nothing compared to the ice in my heart. I stared at the polished wood of the casket as it was lowered into the red Georgia clay. Andre, my son, 42 years old, years. Gone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. 42. How does a healthy 42-year-old man just die? A sudden heart attack, the report said. My mind just couldn't make it fit. Andre was a mechanic, a good one. He had strong hands that could fix anything. He'd changed the oil in my truck just 3 weeks ago, laughing as he lifted the engine block like it was nothing. He didn't have a weak heart. He had the strongest heart I knew. Around me, my community, the friends I'd known for 50 years here in Atlanta, they were crying with me. Deacon Price put a heavy hand on my shoulder. My neighbor, Ms. Alice, was sobbing into a handkerchief. We were a family sharing this impossible grief. And then there was Brenda, my daughter-in-law. She stood next to me, but she was a million miles away. She wore a designer black dress shoes with heels too high for a cemetery and sunglasses so big they covered half her face. She wasn't crying. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. While the preacher spoke about going home to glory, Brenda was checking her watch, a sleek, expensive-looking smartwatch. I saw her thumb swipe across the screen, then the quiet click as she locked it and put it back down. Impatient. The preacher said, "Amen." My friends began to move toward me to offer one last word of comfort. I wanted to stay. I needed a minute alone with my boy. But before I could even take a breath, Brenda's hand clamped onto my arm. Her nails, perfectly manicured and blood red, dug into my sleeve. "That's enough, Zay," she whispered. Her voice wasn't filled with grief. It was sharp, annoyed. "Let's go. We have guests." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman my son loved. I saw a stranger. The reception back at my bungalow in Sweet Auburn was a blur. My house, the one I'd built with my late wife Serena, was filled with the smell of collard greens and fried chicken that my neighbors had brought over. People were talking in hushed tones, sharing stories about Andre. I saw them look at the photos on the mantle, me and Serena on our wedding day. Andre as a little boy in a baseball uniform, missing his 2 front teeth. I just sat in my old armchair, the one Serena had passed away in 10 years ago, and felt numb. One by one, the guests left. "Call us if you need anything, Zay." "We're praying for you, Brother Coleman." Finally, the house was quiet. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room floor. I was exhausted. All I wanted to do was go to my room and be alone with my memories. Brenda walked in from the kitchen. She'd changed out of her black funeral dress. She was wearing jeans and a tight-fitting red sweater. She looked relieved, like a weight had been lifted. "Okay," she said, crossing her arms. "The show's over." I looked up the fog of my grief, making her words sound strange. "Show?" "The crying," she said, her voice flat, "the sad old man routine, and it's done. We need to talk." I tried to stand, my knees aching. "Brenda, I can't talk right now. I'm tired. I just buried my son." "I know," she said. "And I need you to listen. I need you to stop crying, pack your bags, and get out." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. The air left my lungs. Get out." "Yes, get out." I stood up straight, the shock cutting through my exhaustion. "Brenda, what are you talking about? This is my home. I built this house with Serena. I raised Andre in this house." Brenda actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that didn't belong in this house of mourning. "No, Zay, not anymore." She walked over to the kitchen drawer. My kitchen drawer, the one where I keep the warranties and the spare keys, and pulled out a folder. She slapped it down on the coffee table in front of me. "Andre signed this 6 weeks ago," she said, tapping the top page. "It's a quitclaim deed. He signed the house over to me." I fumbled for my reading glasses, my hands shaking so badly I could barely put them on. I picked up the papers. It was legal jargon, but I saw the lines. Grantor Andre Coleman, grantee Brenda Coleman. And at the bottom, a signature. Andre's signature. But it looked wrong. It was shaky. The A was too round. I don't understand," I whispered. "Why would he do this? He would never—" "He was in debt," Brenda said, casually inspecting her fingernails. "Deep debt. We needed collateral for a loan. The house was the only thing he had of value that I could use." A lie. That was a lie. I knew it as surely as I knew my own name. I had given Andre the seed money to start his mechanic shop 10 years ago. He paid me back with interest in 5. That shop was successful. Andre didn't owe anyone a dime. He was meticulous with his money, just like his mother. "He wasn't in debt," I said, my voice quiet. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You don't know anything about his life. You're just the old man he visited on Sundays out of pity. He was in trouble, I helped him, and he gave me the house. He wouldn't do this," I insisted, the paper trembling in my hand. "Not without talking to me." "Well, he did," Brenda snapped, her patience gone. "And now he's dead, which makes me the sole owner. And I am selling this dump. I need the money. So you have 30 days. 30 days? 30 days, she repeated, leaning in, her voice dropping to a vicious hiss. "And if you're not out by then, I will call the Atlanta police and have you thrown out for trespassing. Do you understand me, old man?" I just stared at her. This woman who my son had loved. This woman who I had welcomed into my home, who had eaten at my table. She had waited until the very day I buried my son to throw me out of my own house. I looked at the fake signature on the paper. I thought about her checking her watch at the cemetery. I thought about Andre, healthy and strong, suddenly dying of a heart attack. I thought about the lie she just told me about the debt. And in that instant, something inside me changed. The overwhelming, crushing grief didn't disappear. It crystallized. It turned from a fog into a block of ice, cold, hard, and sharp. My hands stopped shaking. My back straightened. I looked up from the papers and met her gaze. She was expecting me to cry, to beg, to fight. I just nodded, slowly. "All right, Brenda." She blinked, completely thrown. She was not expecting this. "All right, just like that. You're not going to fight. If that's what the paper says," I said, my voice empty and flat, "then that's what it is." "Good," she said, trying to regain her footing. She looked relieved, but also confused. "So, 30 days. I want you out by the 1st of next month." I shook my head. "I don't need 30 days. I turned and walked past her toward my bedroom. She followed me, her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I went to my closet. I pushed past my church suits and my work shirts. In the very back, under an old quilt Serena had made, was a small, worn canvas duffel bag, the one I always kept packed for my fishing trips up at Lake Allatoona. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed. Brenda's eyes went wide. What? What is this? Were you planning on leaving?" I zipped the bag. It was already packed with a change of clothes, my shaving kit, and a small, hard-bound ledger. I walked back into the living room. "Brenda," I said, my voice quiet, "you have no idea what you've just done." I walked to the front door. "Wait!" she yelled, and for the first time I heard a flicker of panic in her voice. "Where are you going? You can't just leave. What am I supposed to tell people?" I stopped at the door, my hand on the knob. I turned and looked back at her, standing in the middle of the house. Serena and I had built the house she had just stolen. I gave her a small, sad smile. "I have things to do." I stepped out onto the porch into the cool night air. I pulled the door shut behind me, the familiar click echoing in the silence. I didn't look back. I heard the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place behind me. I walked down the steps onto the sidewalk of the street I had lived on for 50 years. I heard Brenda laugh through the closed door, a high-pitched, victorious sound. "Fine, go good riddance." She thought she had won. She thought the old man was broken and defeated, wandering off into the night. She had no idea that I wasn't wandering. I was walking toward a plan. She thought she had just inherited a small house. She had no idea she had just declared war on a man who owned half the block. I didn't go to the police. Not right away. I had a much more important stop to make. But I did make one phone call before I went to sleep in a clean, quiet hotel room. I called Kendra Hayes, my lawyer, the woman who had managed the Serena Coleman Trust for the last 10 years. I told her everything. What Brenda said, the fake document, the 30-day threat. Kendra is not a woman who wastes time. She said, "Go to sleep, Zay. I'll handle the morning." And she did. Brenda probably slept better than she had in months there in my bed, in the bed I had shared with Serena. She must have woken up feeling like a queen. She probably thought I was sleeping on a park bench or in some downtown shelter, a broken old man with nowhere to go. I can see her walking through my house like she owned it, touching my wife's photographs, mentally measuring the walls for her new furniture. She made herself coffee in my kitchen. She used Serena's favorite mug, the one with the little blue flowers that Andre had given her one Mother's Day. She sat at the table I built with my own hands, put her feet up on the very chair Andre used to sit in, and she made the call she'd been dying to make. I can hear her voice now, all sugar and business. "Yes, hello, is this Atlanta Premium Realty? I'd like to list a property for immediate sale. It's in the Sweet Auburn district, a lovely vintage bungalow. Yes, it's vacant as of last night. The previous owner is gone." Gone. Just like that. Like I was a piece of trash she'd finally managed to take to the curb. She was probably smiling, calculating the value, imagining the money hitting her bank account when the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock. It wasn't a neighbor bringing a condolence casserole. It was the kind of knock that doesn't ask. It demands. 3 heavy, solid raps on the doorframe that you feel in your chest. She was annoyed. I'm sure of it. She stomped to the door, ready to tell off whoever was interrupting her victory lap. She swung the door open. 2 Atlanta police officers stood on my porch. Officer Tyre, a tall brother with a face that had seen too much, and Officer Grant, a sharp woman who looked like she didn't miss a thing. They were not smiling. "Ma'am," Officer Tyre said, his voice deep. "We're looking for a Mr. Isaiah Coleman." Brenda's smile was all arrogance. She leaned against the doorframe, the perfect picture of the new homeowner. "He's not here. He left last night. I'm the new owner of this property. Can I help you with something, officers?" Officer Grant looked past Brenda, her eyes scanning my living room, then looked back at Brenda. "New owner, that's interesting." Brenda's smile tightened. She didn't like that word. "Is there a problem?" "There might be," Officer Grant said, pulling out her official notepad. "We just received a formal complaint from Mr. Coleman's legal representative. The complaint is for illegal entry, trespassing, and unlawful occupation of this address." Kendra told me later that the blood drained from Brenda's face. All that smug confidence just evaporated. Illegal entry. What are you talking about? This is my house. My late husband left it to me. I live here. She was starting to sound hysterical. I bet my neighbor, Ms. Alice, was already peeking through her blinds. Good. Officer Tyre held up a hand, calm and steady. "Ma'am, we're just here to take a report about the occupation, but that's not the only reason we were dispatched." Brenda froze. I can see her now, her hand grabbing the door. What other reason?" Officer Tyre looked down at his report. "We also received a formal request filed this morning citing new evidence to open an investigation into the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Andre Coleman." That was the moment. The kill shot. Brenda stumbled back, grabbing the doorframe to keep from falling. Her face, Kendra said the officers told her, went perfectly ghostly white. All the lies, all the arrogance, all the victory, it all shattered right there on my front porch. "Suspicious," she whispered, a word she could barely get out. It was a heart attack. The doctor said so." "That's what the initial report says, ma'am," Officer Grant said, her voice like steel. "But Mr. Coleman's attorney seems to believe otherwise. We'll need to ask you a few questions. And ma'am, you probably shouldn't try to sell this house. It's considered part of an active investigation now." Brenda didn't say anything else. She just stared at them, her mind racing, finally understanding. The old man hadn't just wandered off to die. The old man hadn't gone to a homeless shelter. The old man had called his lawyer. The old man had called the police. The old man was fighting back. I wasn't at the police station. I wasn't sitting on a cold bench under fluorescent lights filling out forms. I was 40 floors above Atlanta. The offices of Hayes & Associates are on the top floor of the 1180 Peachtree building, all glass and steel looking out over the city I helped build. The world down there looked small, like tiny ants moving along a track. I sat in a high-backed black leather chair holding a cup of hot tea I didn't want. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped the moment I walked out of my house. Across the desk sat Ms. Kendra Hayes. She's 45, sharp as a diamond, and the only person on earth besides me who knew the truth about Serena's will. She was wearing a dark gray suit that probably cost more than my truck. She's my lawyer, my financial manager, and the closest thing I have to a daughter. Her father and I used to run these streets together. She was on the phone, her voice cold and precise. Yes, Officer Tyre, that's correct. Unlawful occupation, and yes, a formal request to investigate suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of the beneficiary, Andre Coleman. I understand. Please keep me informed of your interaction with the occupant. Thank you. She hung up the phone and swiveled in her chair to face me. A small, tight smile played on her lips. It wasn't a smile of humor. It was a smile of satisfaction. Well, she said, it's done. The police are on your porch right now, as you requested, just a preliminary visit. No arrests. Not yet. She leaned forward. Brenda won't be sleeping well tonight. I nodded, taking a slow sip of the tea. It was chamomile. Kendra knew I couldn't handle coffee when my mind was racing. She had a paper, I said, my voice quiet, almost a whisper. She said Andre signed the house over to her 6 weeks ago. I looked at her, the question hanging in the air, the one I was terrified to ask. Did he, Kendra? Did my boy really sign it? 4. Kendra didn't answer right away. She turned to her large computer monitor. She typed in a password and the screen lit up. I've been busy since you called me from the hotel last night, Zay, she said. She clicked a file. A document appeared on the screen. It was the quitclaim deed. Brenda's name was listed as the grantee. Andre sent me a scan of this last week, Kendra said. He was confused. He said Brenda had asked him to sign it something about a bank loan. He wanted to know what it meant. So he signed it, I said, my heart sinking. Hold on. Kendra clicked again. A second document appeared next to the first. It was a copy of Andre's signature from his business license. She clicked again. A third document, Andre's signature from his passport. I sent Andre's scan to our forensic document examiner at 4 this morning. He owed me a favor. He just sent the report back. I leaned forward. I didn't need to be an expert to see it. The signature on Brenda's deed was shaky. The loop on the A was too round. The C in Coleman was cramped like a child trying to stay inside the lines. Andre's real signature was bold, confident, sharp. It's a fake Zay, Kendra said softly. A forgery. And according to our examiner, it's a terrible one. Amateur. He said it looks like it was traced, but by someone with a shaky hand and a guilty conscience. A wave of something washed over me. It wasn't relief. It was a deeper, colder kind of pain. My son hadn't betrayed me, but his wife had tried to. So she forged his name. I said the words, tasting like ash. She tried to steal the house. Yes, Kendra said. She did. She closed the file. But that's not even the most important part, Zay. I looked at her confused. What's more important than fraud? Kendra leaned back, lacing her fingers together on the polished mahogany desk. Do you remember the promise you made to Serena Zay right before she passed in that hospital room? How could I forget Serena frail but her eyes still bright, grabbing my hand? Zay, she'd whispered, we built this from nothing, from dust and dreams. Don't let some girl with a pretty smile and an empty heart tear it all down. Protect our boy. Protect our work. I remember every word, I whispered. She was always right, wasn't she? Kendra smiled. She saw Brenda coming a mile away, which is why it doesn't matter if that signature was real. It doesn't matter if Andre signed that paper 1,000 times over. I frowned. Kendra, I don't follow. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a large, heavy, leather-bound document. She slid it across the desk. The gold-embossed letters on the cover read, The Serena Coleman Trust. We set this up the day after Serena's funeral, Zay. Remember, you were in a fog, but you signed the papers. We transferred every single asset, every deed, every stock portfolio, every brick of every building we ever bought. She tapped the cover. Including the bungalow on Sweet Auburn. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I looked at Kendra and the pieces started to fall into place. The house. You, Isaiah Coleman, legally own nothing but the clothes on your back and the personal checking account I manage for you. You haven't owned that house in 10 years. The Serena Coleman Trust owns that house, and I am the executor. A slow, cold understanding settled over me. So even if Andre had signed it, it would be a worthless piece of paper. Kendra finished, a grim satisfaction in her voice. You cannot give away what you do not own. Andre knew about the trust, Zay. He sat in this very office with us when we explained it. He knew he was a beneficiary, not the owner. He knew everything was protected. So Brenda just tried to steal something that Andre couldn't even give her. She's not just cruel, Zay, she's ignorant. She was so focused on the one little 3-bedroom house she could see she never bothered to ask about the empire it was built on. I sat back, the weight of the revelation settling on me. The legal victory was absolute. Brenda was a fool. She had nothing. But the relief didn't come. Instead, a new, much darker question began to form in my mind. I looked out the window. The little ant cars were still moving. The city was still going to work. But my world had stopped. The gears were turning. The grief was clearing, and the sharp mind of the man who built that empire, the man Serena had married, was finally taking over. But Kendra, I said slowly, turning back to face her, that doesn't make any sense. What part? Andre, my son. He knew the paper was worthless. He knew about the trust. He was my heir. He was going to inherit everything. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. So why would he forge a document that he knew was useless? Why go through the trouble? Why fake a signature for a house he couldn't sign away? Why would he even show me that scan last week unless... Kendra's professional mask faded. She knew exactly where my mind was going. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a serious low tone. That, Zay, she said, is the $20 million question. The number hung in the air between us. The true value of the Serena Coleman Trust. That's the question I've been asking myself all morning. Why would he do something so illogical? Why would he be confused about a document he knew was fraudulent? She paused, letting the silence stretch, letting me connect the last terrible dot. My blood ran cold. Unless he didn't forge it. Exactly, Kendra said. Unless Brenda forged it thinking Andre owned the house and was planning to confront him with it. Unless he sent me that scan because he was scared. Unless he knew something was wrong. She stood up and walked to the window, standing beside me, shoulder to shoulder, looking down on the city. It's all connected, Zay. The fake signature, the invented debt, the desperate attempt to secure the one asset she could see. She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a cold fire I had only seen in Serena. It's all connected to the sudden, convenient, and very timely heart attack of a healthy 42-year-old man. She didn't just want the house, Zay, Kendra said, her voice like ice. She wanted it all, and Andre, your son. Andre was just in her way. The conference room in Kendra's office was designed to intimidate. 40 floors up, one wall was pure glass looking down on the ant-like rush of Peachtree Street. The table was a single massive slab of dark wood polished so heavily you could see your reflection in it. Brenda and her new lawyer sat on one side. I knew his type. His name was Ron Soloway, and his suit was just a little too shiny. He had the overconfident look of a man who thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, especially when he thinks he's about to steamroll a grieving old man. Brenda sat next to him, back in her role as the sorrowful widow. She wore a simple black dress and kept a tissue in her hand. She wouldn't look at me. I sat opposite them, silent. Kendra Hayes sat at the head of the table, her files arranged in 3 perfect thin stacks. She was all calm, professional control. Ron Soloway cleared his throat, a loud, self-important sound. Let's make this simple, he said, sliding a copy of the quitclaim deed across the table. It slid to a stop right in front of me. My client, Mrs. Brenda Coleman, is the legal and rightful owner of the property at 412 Sweet Auburn Avenue. Here is the deed signed by her late husband, Mr. Andre Coleman, 6 weeks prior to his tragic passing. He leaned back, lacing his fingers over his cheap suit. Frankly, we are appalled. We understand you're grieving Mr. Coleman, but you are leveraging that grief to harass a widow. It is despicable. Brenda let out a small, perfectly timed sob into her tissue. "We are here as a courtesy," Ron continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "We don't want to add to anyone's pain. But my client has been subjected to police harassment at her own home based on your false report. That ends today. If this harassment continues, we will not hesitate to file for a restraining order, and we will sue you for emotional distress. Now," he spread his hands wide, "what do you have to say?" I just looked at him. I didn't say a word. I just waited. Kendra smiled. It was a cold, polite, razor-sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for that performance, Mr. Soloway," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "I appreciate the theater. Now let's talk about facts." And she slid a single-page document across the table. "This, she said, is an affidavit from Mr. Marcus Alvarez. He's a board-certified forensic document examiner, and he has already been retained as our expert witness." Ron's smug look faltered. He picked up the paper. "Expert witnesses are a dime a dozen. We can get our own." "Oh, I insist you do," Kendra said, her smile widening. "But please have your expert check the ink density. Have him look at the hesitation marks on the upstroke of the A in Andre. Have him note the pressure patterns which indicate a slow, deliberate tracing, not a fluid, natural signature." Brenda snapped, her voice high-pitched. "Andre was sick. His hand was shaky." Kendra raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Was he sick 6 weeks ago, Mrs. Coleman? Because his co-workers at the mechanic shop all gave statements that he was lifting engine blocks just fine the day before he died. They said he was in perfect health." She leaned forward. "No, the signature on this deed is a forgery, and according to Mr. Alvarez, it's a very, very bad one." Ron Soloway scoffed, but I could see a bead of sweat on his temple. "That's a bold accusation. You can't prove that. It's his word against ours." "That's the funny part," Kendra said, her voice bright. "We don't have to." She let that sit in the air for a second. Ron looked completely lost. "What? I said we don't have to prove it's a forgery. I'll save you the trouble of hiring your own expert, Mr. Soloway, because even if that signature was 100% genuine, even if Andre himself flew down from heaven, sat at this table and signed it in front of all of us with a golden pen, it wouldn't be worth the paper it's printed on." Ron was now completely pale. "What are you talking about?" Kendra reached down and pulled out a large, heavy, leather-bound binder. It made a solid, expensive sound as she placed it on the table. The gold-embossed letters on the cover read, "The Serena Coleman Trust." "This," Kendra said, tapping the cover, "is the Serena Coleman Trust. It was established 10 years ago upon the death of Mr. Coleman's wife, Serena." She looked directly at Ron. "Mr. Isaiah Coleman, my client, does not personally own that bungalow. He hasn't owned it for a decade. The Serena Coleman Trust owns that property, and as the executor of that trust, I can tell you unequivocally, it is not for sale." Ron's jaw dropped. He frantically shuffled through his own flimsy papers. That's not possible. We ran a title search. The property is listed under Isaiah and Serena Coleman." "A common mistake for a sloppy lawyer," Kendra said, all the kindness gone from her voice. "You ran a simple $50 online search. You didn't check the transfer of assets into the trust filed in Fulton County Docket 15C884. It's all public record. If you had bothered to do your due diligence, you would have known your client's deed is worthless." Ron looked at Brenda, his face a mask of panic. He just realized his client had lied to him, had involved him in a fraud, and had just been publicly humiliated. He stammered, A trust fund? What trust fund?" He looked at me, desperate. "He's just a carpenter. That's what my client said. Just a retired carpenter." Brenda couldn't hold it in. All the acting, all the fake grief, all the smug confidence. It all shattered. She stood up so fast her chair screeched on the hardwood floor and almost toppled over. "He's right," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. The mask was gone. This was the real Brenda. "A trust fund, you're lying." She pointed a shaking, red-nailed finger at me. I hadn't said a single word. I just watched her. "He's just an old man. A retired mock. He lives in that dump. He wears old clothes. He doesn't have a trust fund." She was panting, her eyes wide with a mixture of rage and pure animal panic. "You're a liar. You're a broke old carpenter, and you are lying." Kendra Hayes did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. She let Brenda's shriek echo off the glass walls and fade into a stunned, heavy silence. Ron Soloway, the shiny-suited lawyer, was completely lost. He looked back and forth between Brenda and Kendra, trying to find his footing on ground that was rapidly turning to quicksand. This is irregular. If you have a trust, we demand to see the documents." Kendra simply crossed her arms. Her calm was more terrifying than Brenda's rage. "Oh, Mr. Soloway," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "You still don't get it, do you? You're still stuck on the house. You're still thinking like a small-time lawyer. You think this is about one little bungalow?" She shook her head, a slow, sad motion. "Your client yelled that Mr. Coleman is just a retired carpenter. She's right. He is. He's very proud of the work he did with his hands. He's also the man who quietly, over the last 40 years, bought up the land that those hands worked on." Kendra turned her gaze to Brenda, who was still standing panting, her face red and blotchy. "Brenda, you've been in Atlanta for what, 5 years? You see the new buildings, you see the fancy restaurants, you see the money, but you never bothered to ask who owned the land before it was fashionable." "Isaiah and his wife, Serena," Kendra said, her voice cutting through the silence, "started buying property in the old 4th Ward when no one else would touch it. They bought lots in Inman Park when it was still just warehouses and broken pavement. They believed in this city. They didn't just work in it, they invested in it." Kendra ticked the points off on her fingers. "As of this morning, the Serena Coleman Trust, which I execute, holds the deeds to 12 apartment buildings in the old 4th Ward. It owns 3 commercial blocks in Inman Park. It also—" She paused, gesturing around the opulent room. "Owns the land this entire skyscraper is built on. We are their tenants." Brenda's face went from red to a sick, chalky white. Her knees seemed to buckle. Ron Soloway made a small choking sound like he'd swallowed his own tongue. "I had been silent this whole time. I had watched this woman who married my son, this woman who checked her watch at his funeral, this woman who tried to throw me out of my home. I watched her realize the truth. Now it was my turn. I leaned forward, placing my hands, a carpenter's hands, rough and calloused, on the polished table. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was quiet, but in the dead silence of that room it sounded like a hammer blow. "We lived simply," I said. Brenda flinched as if I had shouted. "My wife Serena and I, we didn't believe in showing off. We didn't wear fancy clothes, we didn't drive expensive cars. We didn't need to. We believed in building. We believed in work." I looked right into Brenda's terrified eyes. "My son Andre, he knew this. He knew all of it. I was teaching him how to manage the assets, how to read the ledgers, how to be a good steward of what his mother and I had built. He was my heir," I said, letting the words land. "He was in training to take over the entire portfolio, an estate Brenda valued at roughly $20 million. Thwump. Brenda didn't just sit down, she collapsed. She fell back into her chair, her mouth wide open, a soundless oh of pure, unadulterated shock. All the air, all the fight, all the venom just vanished. $20 million. She had married a $20 million heir, and she never even knew it. She had been so focused on stealing his car that she never realized he owned the whole dealership. She had tried to forge a deed for a $300,000 house, not knowing he was set to inherit an empire. The look on her face, it wasn't just shock. It was the agony of a lifetime of greed, realizing what it had missed. Ron Soloway was just staring at me, his cheap legal pad forgotten. He looked like he was going to be sick. "So you see," Kendra continued, her voice sharp again, picking up right where I left off. "We really don't care about that little house on Sweet Auburn. You can't have it, obviously. The trust will take possession by the end of the day. But the house," she waved a dismissive hand, "is no longer the point." Brenda looked up confused, her mind still reeling from the numbers. What's the point?" Kendra leaned all the way across the table, her eyes like chips of black ice. "The point," she said, "is that we are very, very interested in why you felt the need to forge your husband's signature. We are very interested in why you lied to your own lawyer about non-existent debts. And we are extremely interested," her voice dropped to a whisper, "why my client's son, a perfectly healthy 42-year-old man, suddenly and mysteriously died of a heart attack, right after you realized you couldn't get your hands on his money." The panic that flashed across Brenda's face was no longer about money. It was about something else entirely. It was the terror of being caught. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, grabbing for her bag, her eyes darting to the door. His death was a tragedy. It was an accident. It was his heart. The meeting with Brenda and her lawyer had ended less than an hour ago. Ron Soloway had practically run out of the room, dragging a catatonic Brenda behind him. They didn't say a word. They just fled. Now Kendra's office was quiet again. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind the cold, ugly truth. My son was dead, and his wife was almost certainly responsible. The door to the conference room opened and Kendra walked in, followed by a man I didn't know. He was a big man, built solid like an old oak tree. He wore a suit that looked like it had been slept in, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. He looked like he'd spent a lot of time watching people and not missing a single detail. "Zay," Kendra said, "this is Malachi Rivers. Mal, this is my client, Mr. Isaiah Coleman." Malachi, or Mal as he introduced himself, shook my hand. His grip was firm, his hand as rough as my own. "Mr. Coleman, I'm sorry for your loss. Kendra tells me you're in a complicated situation." "Mal is the best," Kendra said, sitting down at the table. "He was a detective with APD for 20 years, homicide. Now he finds things for people like us. Things the police don't have time to look for." Mal nodded, taking a seat. He pulled out a small, worn leather notebook and a pen. He didn't say anything. He just waited, his eyes on me. He was a professional listener. I took a deep breath. It felt strange talking about my family this way, like a betrayal, but Andre was gone. The time for protecting feelings was over. This was about justice. "Brenda, my daughter-in-law," I started, my voice still rough. "She said Andre was in debt. That's why he supposedly signed the house over to her." Mal just nodded, writing. "Supposedly. It's a lie," I said. "My son Andre, he was a good boy. He was smart with his money. He built his own business from the ground up with a little help from me to start. But he wasn't reckless. He wasn't a gambler. He wasn't a fool." I paused, the next words hard to get out. "But he was blind when it came to her. He loved Brenda blindly. I told him. I warned him." I remembered a conversation last Christmas. Me and Andre in my workshop, the smell of sawdust in the air. "Son," I'd said, "that woman of yours, she spends money like it's water. And her eyes, they're hungry." Andre had just laughed. "Aw, Pop, you're just old-fashioned. Brenda's ambitious. She just likes nice things. There's no harm in that." No harm. I pushed the memory down. "I warned him," I repeated to Mal. "He didn't listen. Now she says he was in debt. I want to know the truth. I don't believe my son was in debt. I believe she was. I want you to check her finances. Her, not him." Malachi wrote in his notebook. "Check the wife's financials. Debts, gambling, credit cards. Got it." Kendra leaned forward, taking over. Her voice was pure business. "Mal, the situation is this. Brenda produced a forged quitclaim deed for Mr. Coleman's house. She did this after her husband's sudden death from a reported heart attack. She believed Mr. Coleman was a retired carpenter with one house. She just found out today that he is in fact the principal of a $20 million trust, and that her late husband was the sole heir." Malachi's face didn't change, but his pen stopped moving for just a second. He looked up at Kendra. "20 million. Exactly," Kendra said. "And she didn't know about it, which means she was desperate enough to commit fraud and possibly murder for a $300,000 house." "That's a hell of a motive," Mal said quietly. "It gets better," Kendra continued. "Andre had already filed for divorce, and he signed a new will 3 days before he died, cutting her out completely." Malachi let out a low whistle. "So she knew she was about to be left with nothing. No house, no husband, and I'm guessing a lot of bills." "That's what we need you to find," I said, my voice firm. "Brenda said Andre was in debt. I say she was. Find that debt. Find out who she owed. Find out how desperate she really was." Kendra handed him a file. "Here's everything we have on her. Social security number, bank accounts, we know of her car, her workplace. I want to know everything. I want to know what she ate for breakfast. I want to know every call she made. I want to know if she bought any unusual chemicals. I want to know if she searched how to fake a heart attack on her computer. Kendra," I added, "I want to know why she would do this, why she would throw it all away. She had him. She had my son's love. Why wasn't that enough?" Malachi Rivers closed his notebook. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes beyond professionalism. I saw the eyes of a man who had also seen the worst of people. Mr. Coleman, he said, his voice deep and steady. In my experience, for people like her, it's never enough. Love doesn't pay the bills. Not when the bills are from a bookie. He stood up, tucking the file under his arm. I'll start with her financials. The gambling debts, the credit cards. Then I'll trace her movements for the last 2 weeks. Where she went, who she met. I'll pull the security footage from that gas station you mentioned, Kendra. I'll find her creditors. He looked at me. You're right, Mr. Coleman. Your son wasn't in debt. She was. And when you're that deep in the hole, you don't need a reason. You just need an opportunity. Kendra spoke. Find everything, Mal. I want enough evidence to bury her. This isn't just about a house anymore. I understand, Mal said. This is about murder. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. He nodded at me once, a sign of respect, and then he was gone. Kendra and I sat in the silence he left behind. The first step was done. The first stone was thrown. Now all we could do was wait for the ripples. He's good, I said. He's the best, Kendra replied. He'll find it. I looked out the window again. The city was still shining. It looked so peaceful from up here. But I knew that down there in the streets, I used to know a predator was walking free. A woman who had smiled at my son, and then I was sure had stopped his heart. She called me old man, I said quietly, mostly to myself. What? Kendra asked. Brenda. At the house after the funeral, she called me old man. She thought I was just a broke, sad old man. She thought I was weak. She thought I didn't know anything. She thought I was stupid. I turned away from the window and looked at my lawyer. A cold, hard anger was settling in my bones, giving me strength. She's about to find out how wrong she was. Kendra's office was quiet. 48 hours had passed since our meeting with Brenda. 48 hours of me pacing the floor of my hotel room, waiting. Kendra had been working, making calls, her voice a low, steady hum in the background of my grief. I had just sat in that quiet hotel, staring at the Atlanta skyline, thinking about Andre. Thinking about 42 years. Malachi Rivers was punctual. At exactly 9 o'clock, he knocked once and entered Kendra's office carrying a thin briefcase and that same worn leather notebook. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. He nodded at me, and Kendra sat down and opened his file. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Mr. Coleman, Ms. Hayes, he began, his voice a low rumble. You asked me to find out if Brenda Coleman was in debt. And was she? I asked, my voice rough. Malachi looked at me. Mr. Coleman, your daughter-in-law wasn't just in debt. She was drowning in it. You said she was acting like a grieving widow. That's the role she's playing, Kendra said, her hands steepled on the desk. Well, Malachi said, her grief took her on a road trip. The day after the funeral, the day after she drove her car a car, Andre paid for 5 hours north. He slid a glossy photograph across the polished table. It wasn't a file photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance. Brenda. She was standing at a blackjack table, a stack of chips in front of her. She wasn't crying. She looked desperate, her eyes glued to the cards. Where is this? I asked, my stomach turning. The main floor of the Horseshoe Casino in Cherokee, North Carolina, Malachi said. Taken 12 hours ago, she was there all night. And she wasn't just gambling, she was losing, badly. He slid a second photo over. This one was outside under the harsh yellow lights of the casino entrance. Brenda was backed against a column, looking terrified. Standing in front of her was a large, imposing man in a cheap suit. He was smiling, but it wasn't a nice smile. Who is that? Kendra asked, leaning in. His name is Slick Vinny Russo, Malachi said. He's not a casino employee. He's a loan shark, runs operations out of Marietta. He looked unhappy. My guy on the ground said she was begging for more time. She wasn't there for fun, Mr. Coleman. She was there to either pay up or beg. So I was right, I said, my voice heavy. She's in deep. You don't know the half of it, Malachi replied. He flipped open his notebook. You said she accused Andre of being in debt. That was the first thing I checked. He looked at me and his eyes softened for just a second. Your son, Mr. Coleman, he was clean, meticulous. His mechanic shop is fully in the black. His credit score was an 810. He had zero debt outside of his share of the property taxes, which were paid on time. He was a solid citizen. Just as we thought, Kendra said. But Brenda, Malachi continued, Brenda is a financial ghost, on paper. She has no official credit cards in her name, no car loans, no mortgage, nothing, which is strange for a 40-year-old woman in 2025. She always said Andre handled all the money, I murmured. He did, Malachi said. But not in the way you think. He was paying for her life, but he wasn't paying for her habits. I had to go deeper. I pulled records from offshore accounts, online sports betting sites based in Costa Rica, and that's where I found the real story. He turned a page in his notebook. Mrs. Coleman has 3 active high-interest lines of credit with offshore gambling sites. She's been kiting moving money between them to cover her losses, and she has been losing. A lot. For a long time. Kendra leaned forward, her voice like ice. How much, Mal? As of this morning, Malachi said, between the online sites and what my source says she owes Slick Vinny, she is $150,000 in the hole. $150,000. The room felt cold. Andre's entire life savings, the shop he built it, wouldn't even be enough to cover it. And Zay's trust, Kendra whispered, is worth $20 million. She was sitting on a gold mine and couldn't get a penny. It gets worse, Malachi said. She tried to touch it. I found 3 rejected loan applications from the last month. All attempts to get a home equity loan against your bungalow, Zay. All forged. All using Andre's name and social security number. The banks rejected them because the property isn't in his name. So she faked the deed, I said, the pieces clicking into place. She faked the deed thinking she could use the house as collateral to pay Vinny. She must have thought the trust was just some legal nonsense she could bypass. Exactly, Malachi said. She was desperate. She was out of time. She was trying to get any asset she could. But Andre found out. Kendra looked up. The argument. You found the security footage. I did, Malachi said. He pulled a small laptop from his briefcase and turned it around. From the BP station on Howell Mill Road, the night he died. The call to 911 was made from their apartment at 10:03 p.m. This footage is from 9:15 p.m. He pressed play. There it was. Andre's familiar blue Ford truck parked under the bright buzzing lights of the gas station. Andre was in the driver's seat. Brenda was in the passenger seat. There was no audio, but we didn't need any. The scene inside that truck was violent. Andre was yelling, his face dark with a rage I had never seen in my son, not once in his entire 42 years. He was shaking, his whole body rigid. Brenda was screaming back at him, her face twisted and ugly. My God, I whispered, my hand coming to my mouth. What's that in his hand? Kendra asked, pointing at the screen. Watch, Malachi said. Andre roared something we couldn't hear. He took a thick stack of papers and threw them, hurled them right into Brenda's face. The white pages exploded in the cab, scattering across the dashboard and her lap like confetti. Brenda recoiled as if she'd been slapped. Then she started screaming back, pure fury, trying to gather the papers, her hands grabbing at them. Andre just pointed a finger in her face, his arm straight and shaking, yelling. Then he slammed both hands on the steering wheel so hard the whole truck rocked. He was telling her it was over. I knew my son. That was the end. Malachi paused the video. He drove off 2 minutes later. Less than an hour after that, Brenda called 911 to report her husband was unconscious and not breathing from a heart attack. I stared at the frozen image of my son's angry, betrayed face. The papers. What were those papers, Mal? Was it the forgery, the gambling debts? That's what I assumed, Malachi said. But the deed was just one document. The bank statements, maybe. But this was thick, at least 20-30 pages. It looked official. I was stuck. I spent all yesterday trying to figure out what those papers were. I couldn't find anything. But you found something, I said. It wasn't a question. I did, Malachi replied. I started thinking. If Andre found out about the forgery and the $150,000 debt, what's the first thing a smart man does? He doesn't just yell at a gas station. He protects himself. Kendra's head snapped up. He calls his lawyer. Exactly, Malachi said. But he didn't call you Ms. Hayes. You managed the trust. This was marital. This was personal. A divorce attorney, Kendra whispered. Bingo, Malachi said. I ran a check on Andre's private cell phone records for the last 2 weeks. He made 3 calls to a number I didn't recognize. A private law office in Buckhead. A high-priced family law specialist named Maria Flores. Very discreet. Very expensive. A divorce lawyer, I said the word, feeling strange on my tongue. Andre, he was finally leaving her. A terrible aching sadness mixed with a sharp relief. He was getting out. It looks that way, Mr. Coleman, Malachi said. I went to that office this morning. I showed Ms. Flores my credentials, explained the circumstances. She was hesitant, citing attorney-client privilege. But when I mentioned the words suspicious death and $20 million trust, she became much more cooperative. Malachi reached into his briefcase and pulled out one last file. It was a thin, legal-sized envelope. He slid it across the table. "What is this?" Kendra asked, her hand resting on it. "Those," Malachi said, "are the papers Andre threw in her face." My hand trembled. Kendra opened the flap and pulled out the contents. "My God, Zay," she whispered. She laid them on the table. The first one was a petition for divorce, filed 2 days before he died. The second one was a new will. The lawyer said Andre was incredibly proud of it. Malachi said, his voice quiet. He signed it, had it witnessed and notarized just 3 days before he died. He was protecting his assets. He was protecting you, Mr. Coleman. I reached out and touched the paper. It was Andre's new will. It was simple. It was 1 page. It revoked all previous wills, and it stated in clear, bold type that 100% of his personal estate, his business, his truck, his savings, everything outside of the Serena Coleman Trust was to be left to his father. Isaiah Zay Coleman. Brenda's name was nowhere on it. I looked at Kendra and she looked at me. The final terrible piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Brenda didn't just know she was in debt. She knew she was being cut off. She knew she was being divorced. She knew she was being disinherited. She wasn't just losing a house. She was losing everything. And on that night at that gas station, Andre had handed her the proof. He had handed her, I realized with a sickening lurch, her own motive for murder. Malachi sat across from me in Kendra's glass-walled conference room. The file in his hand was thin, but it felt as heavy as a tombstone. $150,000. Malachi said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to shake the polished table. That's my conservative estimate. It's probably more. I just nodded. The number didn't shock me. It just fit like the last piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Slick Vinny Russo doesn't like to be kept waiting, Malachi continued. He'd given her until the end of the month. That was 5 days from the day Andre died. She was out of time and out of options. Kendra, who had been standing by the window looking down at the city, turned around. Her face was grim. "Which brings us to these," she said, walking back to the table. She was holding a manila envelope. It was not from her files. It was from the outside. Maria Flores, the divorce attorney Malachi found, gave these to me this morning. She said Andre was agitated when he came to her. He was angry, but he was also terrified. He told her he thought Brenda was capable of anything. My hands clenched on the table. He was right, Kendra said softly. Ms. Flores said that after Andre signed the documents, he asked her to hold the originals. He said he was going to give Brenda copies. He wanted to do it in person. He said she needs to see that it's real. She needs to know it's over. Kadindra looked at me. These, she said, tapping the envelope, are the originals. These are the papers Andre threw in his wife's face less than an hour before she called 911. My breath caught in my throat. I watched as Kendra's slim, steady hands opened the flap and slid 2 documents out. She pushed the first one toward me. I didn't need my reading glasses to see the large, bold letters at the top. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I traced the names with my finger. Andre Coleman, petitioner. Brenda Coleman, respondent. I saw the date it was filed with the Fulton County Court, 2 days before he died. He did it. I whispered, a terrible, aching sadness washing over me. He was finally leaving her. He was getting out. He was Zay, Kendra said. He was getting out. He was protecting himself, and he was protecting you. She pushed the second document toward me. This one was different. It wasn't a court filing. It was simpler. I read the title. Last Will and Testament of Andre Coleman. I looked at the date. 3 days before he died. Signed, witnessed, and notarized in Maria Flores' office. My eyes scanned the text. It was short. To to the point, just like my son. I, Andre Coleman, hereby revoke any and all former wills and testaments. I read the next paragraph. I give, devise, and bequeath 100% of my personal estate, including my business, Andre's Auto Repair, all bank accounts held in my name, my vehicle, and all personal effects, to my father, Isaiah Coleman. I read the paragraph again and again, looking for the name that wasn't there. Brenda's name was gone. She was completely, totally, and legally disinherited. The room was silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the city 40 floors below. I looked at the divorce papers. I looked at the new will. I thought about Malachi's words. $150,000. I thought about the forged deed. And I thought about that grainy video at the gas station. My son, his face dark with rage, throwing those very papers at the woman who was screaming at him. He wasn't just yelling at her, he was showing her. He was showing her the end of her entire world. I looked up at Kendra, the cold, hard certainty finally settling in my heart, sharp and heavy as a shard of steel. She knew, I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was dead. That night, I said, in that truck she knew. She wasn't just losing a house she couldn't get. She was losing everything. I stood up the chair, scraping back, and walked to the glass wall. I looked down at the city, at all those moving cars, all those people living their lives not knowing what was happening up here. The divorce meant she got nothing from him in life. The will meant she got nothing from him in death. The debt meant her creditors were about to break her legs. She had nothing, I whispered. He had just handed her proof that she had absolutely nothing left to lose. I turned around and faced them. The grief was still there, a hot coal in my chest, but now it was surrounded by a cold, righteous anger. Kendra Hayes stood up, her face a mask of cold fury. "That's right, Zay," she said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. "This is no longer about a forged signature. This isn't about fraud. This isn't about a house." She walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. "This," she said, "is motive. This is premeditation. This is murder." Brenda was in my living room, my wife's living room, when the courier arrived. She was probably counting the minutes until she could sell Serena's antique furniture. She signed for the large legal envelope with an annoyed flourish, probably thinking it was just more paperwork from her own incompetent lawyer. She ripped it open with one of her long red nails. She pulled out the documents. I wish I could have seen her face in that moment. She read the first page. It was a formal notice from Kendra Hayes' law firm informing her that a civil investigation was underway regarding the fraudulent deed. She probably scoffed at that. Old news. Then she read the second page. It was a copy of the report from the forensic document examiner. It detailed in cold scientific language exactly how the signature was a forgery. It mentioned hesitation marks, unnatural pressure, and clear evidence of tracing. Her heart probably started to beat a little faster then. Then she read the third page. It was a sworn affidavit from Maria Flores, Andre's divorce attorney. It stated that Andre had retained her services to begin divorce proceedings. Brenda's breath probably caught in her throat. Then she read the fourth and final page. A certified copy of Andre's new will. The will that left her with nothing. Absolutely nothing. The papers must have slipped from her fingers. She wasn't just losing the house. She had already lost everything before Andre even died. The whole thing, her entire plan, had been for nothing. She was trapped. She was a self-confessed fraud. I can see her pacing the floor, panicking. The walls of my house closing in on her. She probably thought about the police, about the questions they asked. Suspicious circumstances. She probably thought about her debts. $150,000. Slick Vinny Russo. The end of the month was coming. She wasn't just going to be broke. She wasn't just going to be homeless. She was going to jail. And then she would have thought about Andre, about his death, about that heart attack. She would have realized that Zay and Kendra weren't just investigating the house. They were investigating her. They were looking for a murderer. She was completely and totally cornered. All the facts, all the money, all the law, it was all on my side. She had no way out. So she did what cornered animals do. She decided to bite. She couldn't fight me on the facts. The facts would put her in a prison cell for the rest of her life. She couldn't fight me with money. She just found out I had all of it and she had none. So she decided to fight me with the one weapon she had left, the one weapon she knew how to use. She would fight me in the court of public opinion. She would change the story. This wouldn't be about a grieving father seeking justice for his murdered son. Oh no, she was much smarter than that. She picked up her phone. Her hands were probably shaking, but not from fear anymore, from rage. She scrolled through her contacts past the loan sharks and the bookies until she found a name. Donnie Price, Channel 5 News. A local reporter she'd met at a party, once a man she knew was always looking for a juicy, sensational story. She took a deep breath. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she was no longer the panicked fraud. She was the grieving widow. She summoned the tears. She pressed the call button. Donnie, she whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. Donnie Price, it's Brenda. Brenda Coleman, Andre's wife. She paused, letting out a perfectly timed sob. Yes, thank you. It's just been a nightmare. Thank you for your card. Another pause. Donnie, I'm so scared. I didn't know who else to call. Something terrible is happening. It's my father-in-law, Isaiah Coleman. Yes, the one who owns all that property. He's trying to take everything from me, Donnie. I'm a widow. My husband has only been in the ground for 2 days, and he's trying to throw me out on the street. He's saying I forged papers. He's saying I'm a criminal. She was crying for real now, I'm sure, tears of pure manipulative genius. I don't know what to do. I'm just a grieving white woman, Donnie, and he's this rich, powerful black millionaire, and he's trying to destroy me. He's using all his money, all his lawyers, and I have no one. Please, can you just tell my story? She listened, then nodded, wiping away her fake tears. Yes, I can be ready in an hour. Thank you, Donnie. You're saving my life. She hung up the phone. The tears stopped instantly. Her face, I imagine, set into a mask of cold, hard calculation. She couldn't win in a court of law, so she was going to put me on trial on the 6 o'clock news. Let's see how Atlanta likes that story, old man, she probably whispered to the empty, silent house. Let's see them turn against the poor, grieving widow. I was in my hotel room when Kendra called me. She didn't say hello. She just said, "Turn on Channel 5, now." I fumbled for the remote, my hands shaking. The hotel television flickered on. The 6 o'clock news. There was my house, my porch. The porch Serena and I had spent thousands of nights on, watching the world go by. And there was Brenda. She looked small, fragile. She was wearing a simple white blouse, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like a victim. She was dabbing her eyes with a crumpled tissue as she spoke to the reporter Donnie Price. His face was a mask of professional concern. I just don't know where else to turn, Brenda whispered, her voice cracking perfectly. My husband Andre, he's only been gone for a few days. She broke down a sob catching in her throat. The camera zoomed in on a single tear rolling down her cheek. The reporter put a hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Coleman, you made some very serious claims. Can you tell us what is happening? Brenda took a shaky breath. It's my father-in-law, Isaiah Coleman. She said my name like it was a curse. He's trying to throw me out of my home. The reporter looked shocked. He's evicting you just days after you buried his son. Yes, she cried, the tears coming faster. He's a very wealthy man, a real estate millionaire. He owns half of Atlanta, and I'm just a widow with nothing. And he wants to take the one thing my husband Andre left me, this house. I couldn't breathe. I was just staring at the screen. She was brilliant. She was a monster, but she was brilliant. He never liked me, she continued, looking right into the camera, into the eyes of every person in Atlanta watching. He never thought I was good enough for Andre. He never accepted our marriage. She paused, as if gathering the courage to say the next part. Maybe it's because I'm not from his world. I'm just a simple white woman from Marietta. I don't have his power. I don't have his money. There it was. She did it. She actually did it. And now that Andre is gone, she sobbed, there's no one left to protect me. He's punishing me for loving his son. What am I supposed to do? What can a lonely, grieving white widow do against a powerful, wealthy man like that? He has teams of lawyers. I have nothing. just my husband's memory. And he's trying to steal that too. The reporter Donnie Price looked directly into the camera, his face filled with outrage. A shocking accusation. Mrs. Coleman, are you saying you're being forced out onto the street? He gave me 30 days, she whispered as if the words were too painful to say. 30 days. Right after the funeral. He told me to get out. He wants me gone. Please, somebody help me. The screen cut back to the news anchor in the studio, her face a mask of disbelief and sympathy. A truly heartbreaking story. We've reached out to Mr. Isaiah Coleman's representatives for a comment, but have not yet heard back. Kendra's phone buzzed in my hand. I had thrown mine against the wall. Her office line, her cell phone, my hotel phone. They were all ringing. A storm had just broken over my head. Kendra clicked off the television with the remote. The silence in her office was deafening. She looked at her buzzing cell phone on the desk. The screen was lit up. It was a local news blog. The headline read, "Grieving Widow versus Atlanta Millionaire." She looked at another one. "Sweet Auburn land baron tries to evict white daughter-in-law." "She did it," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. "She's standing on my porch in front of my house, a house Serena and I built with our bare hands. And she's telling the world I'm the monster." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. My city. After what she did, after killing him, she dares to use her skin color against mine as a weapon. I turned from the window, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles were white. She's telling them I'm the powerful black millionaire oppressing the poor little white woman in Atlanta, Georgia. She knows exactly what she's doing. "Yes, she does," Kendra said, her voice calm. "Get on the phone," I ordered. "Call the station. Call every station. We'll tell them the truth. We'll show them the will, the divorce papers, the $150,000 gambling debt. We'll destroy her." Kendra held up a single steady hand. "No." The word stopped me cold. "No. What do you mean, no? She is slandering my name. She is destroying my reputation. She is painting me as a racist monster." "Zay, listen to me," Kendra said, her voice cutting through my rage. "This is exactly what she wants. She's cornered. She has no facts. She has no case. She can't win in a court of law, so she's trying to win in the court of public opinion. She wants a media fight," Kendra continued. "She knows if we jump into this mud pit with her, we just get dirty. We will look like we're attacking the poor grieving widow she's pretending to be. We would be proving her point. So we just let her," I roared. "We let her do this. We let her talk," Kendra said, a cold, hard smile forming on her face. "We let her go on every show that will have her. We let her cry her fake tears all over Atlanta. We let her lie and lie and lie again." "Why?" I demanded. "Because she's not just lying, Zay. She's committing perjury before she even gets to the stand. Every single word she says on television is another lie we can disprove with facts. She is building our case for us. She is hanging herself with her own tongue." She picked up her phone. Malachi is still working. He's not looking for gambling debts anymore. He's talking to the coroner's office. He's pulling the 911 call. He's finding the money trail. Kendra looked at me. Her eyes as fierce as Serena's ever were. "Brenda thinks she's playing checkers on the 6 o'clock news. We are playing chess in a federal courthouse. So let her talk. Let her slander you. Let her cry to the entire city." She walked over and stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder, looking out the window. "We will not respond on television, Zay. We will respond in court, with the forged deed, with the divorce papers, with the new will, with the gambling debts, and," she took a deep breath, "with the medical examiner's final report. And when we do, we will not just take back your good name, we will take away her freedom." I looked at the city lights twinkling on below. The rage in my chest slowly cooled, hardening back into that block of ice. She was right. Let her talk. The Fulton County Courthouse is a cold place. It's not like on television. The marble floors are worn and the air smells like stale coffee and floor polish. I sat on a hard wooden bench next to Kendra wearing my Sunday suit, the one I buried Serena in, the one I buried Andre in. Across the room sat Brenda. She was back in her widow's costume, a simple black dress, a delicate veil covering her face. She held a tissue. She was performing. Her lawyer, Ron Soloway, was strutting in front of the judge's bench like he owned the place. He was performing too. The courtroom was half full. That reporter, Donnie Price, was in the front row, his pen ready. Brenda had made sure of that. Your Honor, Ron Soloway said, his voice booming in the quiet room. This is a tragedy, a simple, heartbreaking tragedy. He gestured dramatically toward Brenda, who produced a perfect, quiet sob on cue. We are here because my client, a grieving, penniless widow, is being harassed by this man. He pointed at me. Isaiah Coleman, a man who we have recently discovered is not a simple carpenter, but a wealthy real estate baron, a man of considerable hidden power. He let those words hang in the air. He was already playing his hand. This is a simple case of greed, Your Honor. Mr. Coleman is leveraging the death of his own son to persecute his daughter-in-law. And I must say, the racial undertones are disturbing. A powerful, wealthy black man using his teams of lawyers to intimidate and evict a grieving, vulnerable white woman from her home. I watched the judge, Judge Alston, an older black woman, sharp as a tack, with eyes that looked like they had heard every lie in the world. She didn't blink. She just looked bored. Ron Soloway continued his performance. My client is the victim here. All she wants is the home her loving husband gave her. This is nothing short of a public lynching, and we demand justice. He sat down, looking very pleased with himself. The reporter was scribbling frantically. Judge Alston looked at us. Her voice was tired. Ms. Hayes, your response. Kendra stood up. She was the picture of calm. Your Honor, Mr. Soloway is correct about one thing. This is a tragedy, but it is not the one he is describing. She picked up the forged deed. He has filed a suit to claim ownership of the property at 412 Sweet Auburn Avenue. He claims his client is the victim. Kendra placed the paper back down. We are not here to debate the ownership of that house, Your Honor. In fact, we move for an immediate summary dismissal of this entire case. Ron Soloway shot up from his chair. On what grounds we have a deed? It is a valid legal document. Judge Alston fixed him with a cold stare. Sit down, Mr. Soloway. You will wait your turn. She looked back at Kendra. On what grounds, Ms. Hayes? Kendra's voice was clear and sharp as glass. On the grounds that the suit is frivolous, Your Honor. The grantor, Mr. Andre Coleman, had no legal authority to sign that deed, because neither he nor his father, my client, owns that property. Ron Soloway's mouth dropped open. What? The property at 412 Sweet Auburn, Kendra continued, like all of Mr. Coleman's properties, was placed into a protected, irrevocable trust, the Serena Coleman Trust. It was established 10 years ago. Mr. Isaiah Coleman is the beneficiary. I am the executor. Andre Coleman could not give away a house he did not own. Brenda's lawyer was completely lost. That's not possible. We ran a title search. The property is listed under Isaiah Coleman. A common mistake for a sloppy lawyer, Kendra said, her voice cutting. You ran a $50 online search. You didn't check the transfer of assets into the trust filed in Fulton County docket 15C884. It is all public record. If you had bothered to do your due diligence, counselor, you would have known your client's deed is worthless. Ron Soloway was white as a sheet. He looked at Brenda, his face a mask of panic. He just realized his client had lied to him, and he had just embarrassed himself in front of a judge. Judge Alston looked at him over her glasses. Is this true, Mr. Soloway? Did you check the trust filings? Ron stammered. We were not aware. The judge slammed her gavel. The sound cracked through the room. Then this case is dismissed. We are done here. Brenda looked at Ron, her face twisted in confusion and rage. What does that mean? What just happened? Ron was packing his briefcase, his hands shaking. It means you lost the house. But Kendra wasn't finished. She didn't sit down. Your Honor, she said, before we are dismissed, Mr. Soloway, on behalf of his client, publicly accused my client of harassment and malicious intent. He did this on television, and he did it again in this courtroom. My client's reputation has been slandered. The truth must be entered into the record. Judge Alston sighed. Ms. Hayes, the case is dismissed. I understand, Your Honor, Kendra said, her voice firm. But the reason for this fraudulent deed is now part of an active criminal investigation. The press is here. The public is here. The truth must be heard. The judge looked at the reporter, then at me, then back at Kendra. You have 2 minutes, Ms. Hayes. Make them count. Kendra smiled. Thank you, Your Honor. She turned slightly, facing not just the judge, but the whole room. Mr. Soloway claims his client is a penniless widow. He is half right. She is penniless, but not because my client is greedy. Kendra held up a new file. She is penniless because she has a $150,000 gambling debt owed to Mr. Vinny Russo of Marietta. Brenda gasped. Ron Soloway objected, but the judge just waved him into silence. She was desperate, Kendra continued, which is why she forged the deed. She knew she couldn't ask her husband for the money. Why? Because Mr. Andre Coleman had just served her with these. Kendra held up the second document. A petition for divorce. He was leaving her. A wave of murmurs went through the courtroom. The reporter was writing so fast I thought his pen would catch fire. Brenda Coleman was about to be divorced, exposed, and left with nothing but her debts. Andre knew exactly who he was married to, which is why 3 days before he died, he signed a new will. Kendra held up the third document. A will that explicitly disinherits his wife Brenda and leaves 100% of his personal estate to his father, Isaiah Coleman. The room was in total shock. Brenda finally found her voice. It wasn't a whisper. It was a raw animal scream. "Liar, you are a liar. He loved me. He would never..." Judge Alston slammed her gavel again and again. "Order, order in this court. Mrs. Coleman, control yourself, or I will have you removed." Kendra waited. She waited until Brenda's screams turned into hysterical sobs. Then her voice dropped, becoming deadly quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "She's right about one thing, Your Honor. Andre isn't here to tell us. She made sure of that." "Objection," Ron yelled on his feet. "Slander. My client is the victim." "It is not slander," Kendra said, "when it is a fact, Your Honor, because of this clear financial motive. The divorce, the disinheritance, the debt. We petitioned the state for a full autopsy. We had Andre Coleman's body exhumed last week." Brenda froze. Her sobs stopped. She looked up, her face a mask of pure terror. Kendra held up the last, thickest file. "I have here the final report from the Fulton County Medical Examiner. Andre Coleman did not die of a heart attack. His heart was perfectly healthy." I watched Brenda. Her eyes were wide. She wasn't breathing. "He died," Kendra announced, "of massive systemic internal bleeding, caused by lethal doses of warfarin, rat poison, administered in his coffee over a period of several weeks. A slow, agonizing, painful death." Kendra Hayes, my protector, my wife's legacy, turned from the judge. She looked directly at Brenda. Her voice rang out clear and final. "You didn't just lose the house, Brenda. You murdered him." Brenda collapsed. It wasn't a faint. It was a complete breakdown. A wail came out of her, a sound of pure damned guilt. Ron Soloway just sat there, his career and his life flashing before his eyes. And then I saw them, the same two officers who had stood on my porch, Officer Tyre and Officer Grant. They had been standing quietly at the back of the courtroom the entire time. They began to walk forward. They walked past the gasping reporter. They walked past the shocked crowd. They walked right up to the defense table where Brenda was sobbing hysterically, screaming, "No, no, no, he's lying. They're lying." Officer Tyre put his heavy hand on her shoulder. "Brenda Coleman, you are under arrest for the first-degree murder of Andre Coleman." The reporter's camera flashed a blinding white light. Brenda screamed as they pulled her to her feet, twisted her arms behind her back, and snapped the handcuffs on. "It was him!" she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "It was the old man. He set me up. He framed me. He killed his own son." But no one was listening. They dragged her out of the courtroom, her screams echoing down the marble hallway. I just sat there next to Kendra. I watched her go. I did not feel joy. I didn't feel relief. I just felt quiet. I looked at the empty chair where my son's murderer had just been, and for the first time since Andre's funeral, I felt the ice in my chest finally begin to melt. Justice Serena, I thought. I kept my promise. Justice for our boy. It was 3 months before I could walk back into my house on Sweet Auburn Avenue. 3 months of legal depositions, of signing papers, of listening to the ugly details of Brenda's appeals being denied. The media circus had finally died down. The cameras were gone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I had asked Kendra to meet me there. The police had removed the tape weeks ago, but I hadn't been able to bring myself to cross the threshold. Today I finally did. It smelled musty, like a place that had been locked up with its grief for too long, but it was clean. Kendra had hired a service to come in and put everything back in order. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the one I built, sipping a cup of tea. She looked tired, but she smiled when I walked in. "It's good to see you home, Zay," she said softly. I nodded, my throat tight. I walked over to the mantel. The pictures were still there. Me and Serena on our wedding day. Andre, 7 years old, holding up a crooked birdhouse he'd made in my workshop, that big gap-toothed smile on his face. She'll never get out, you know, Kendra said to my back. The state's case was airtight. First-degree murder with special circumstances of financial gain. They won't ever grant her parole. She's going to die in prison. I touched the frame of Andre's photo. A life for a life. Seems like a bad trade all around. I turned and sat down across from her. The kitchen was just as I'd left it, except for a large roll of paper spread out on the table. Blueprints. Kendra looked at them, then at me. So, what are you going to do now, Zay? With all of this? All of this, I repeated, looking around the small, simple room. This little bungalow was what Brenda had killed for, this little piece of wood and plaster. I looked back at the picture of my son. The craziest part, I said, my voice rough, the part I still can't get out of my head, is that she did all of it. The lies, the forgery, the poison. She did it all for this. I tapped the table. This 3-bedroom house, maybe $300,000 on a good day. I looked at Kendra. She had no idea, did she? She was married to the heir of $20 million and she murdered him for pocket change. She was ignorant, Zay, Kendra said, and she was greedy. It's a bad combination. All that money, I said, shaking my head. All those years Serena and I worked saving, building, investing. All of it. And the only thing Brenda could see was the one thing right in front of her nose. I was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the clock on the wall, the same clock that had ticked through Andre's entire childhood. Kendra pointed to the blueprints on the table. You've been busy. I've been thinking, I said. Thinking about what Serena wanted. Protect our work, she told me. I thought she meant I should protect the money, the buildings, the assets. But I was wrong. I've been wrong for 10 years. What do you mean? Kendra asked. I unrolled the blueprints. They weren't for a house. They were for a large, low-slung building. It had wide doors, high ceilings, and rows of workbenches. She didn't mean the money, Kendra. She meant the work, the value of it, the pride in it. I looked out the kitchen window, past my small yard, toward the neighborhood I'd lived in my whole life, toward the kids I saw on the corners with nothing to do, no place to go, kids who looked just like Andre did once upon a time. Kendra, I said, turning back to her. My voice was steady now. I want you to start the process. Begin liquidating the non-essential assets. Sell the commercial block in Inman Park and the apartments over on Edgewood. We have enough. Kendra raised an eyebrow. Enough for what, Zay? You planning on moving to the Bahamas? I smiled. The first real, genuine smile I'd felt in months. It felt strange on my face. No, I'm staying right here. It's time to finally use the Serena Coleman Trust for what it was meant for. I tapped the blueprints. I'm going to build a community center, right here in this neighborhood. A place for these kids. But not just a place to play basketball. I'm going to build a workshop, a state-of-the-art carpentry and mechanics shop. Free for any kid in Atlanta who wants to learn how to build something with their hands instead of just taking what isn't theirs. Kendra looked at the plans, then back at me, and I saw her professional mask melt away. I saw the kid who used to run around these streets with my son. She was smiling. We'll teach them how to read a plan, I said, my voice growing stronger, a new purpose settling into my bones. How to measure twice and cut once. How to respect the tools. How to feel that pride when you've made something real. What are you going to call it? She asked. I looked back at the mantel. At my boy with his gap-toothed smile holding that crooked birdhouse. We're going to call it Andre's Workshop. I looked back at Kendra. Serena and I spent 40 years building our assets. It's time to stop building assets, Kendra. It's time to start building a future. If there is one thing I have learned from this nightmare, it is this: never underestimate the person who is quiet. The world is full of people like Brenda who measure your worth by the shine on your shoes or the car you drive. They are loud, arrogant, and blind. But true strength, true wealth is built in silence. It is built on character, patience, and loyalty. Greed always overplays its hand and destroys itself. The truth, however, just waits patiently in the shadows, ready for its moment to be told. Thank you for listening to my story. Now I have to ask you, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have seen the warning signs in Brenda? Have you ever felt underestimated by someone who only saw the surface and missed who you truly were? Let me know your own story and where you are watching from in the comments below. Your stories give me strength. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so I can continue to share my journey with you.